It is our favorite time of the week once again. Time for hashtag Rise and Q's, where we answer your questions. And by the way, we got a fancy new backdrop for you. Look at that. Isn't that a thing of beauty?
It's very cool. All right. Question 1 from Sean Nelson. Why hasn't the MSM or independent media put more pressure on Congress to return to Washington before May 4th to address this crisis? We have a financial avalanche developing across the country in all sectors. Well, Sean, I don't know what other show you're watching because we've been
talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
I think I do think this is the sort of thing that has the opportunity, the possibility of being a bipartisan rallying cry, because every American has to look at the fact that Congress isn't here to do anything, even if they wanted to do anything, is absolutely outrageous when you have grocery workers, frontline healthcare workers, delivery workers, warehouse workers out there risking their lives to keep the gears turning in our society, and our lawmakers, our so-called public servants, can't be here to do their job. It is absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and of course, mainstream media, everything is like, oh, Democrats bad, or Democrats good, Republicans bad. It's like, oh, the Dems just want to fight to bail out these like corrupt hospitals, right? Like, you think these hospitals are beacons of health in China? No, they're trying to get money because they're not making any money off these elective surgeries, and because they're run by these massive conglomerates. And by the way, one of the main things that was proposed by the House Democrats in terms of insurance subsidies was the number one ask by the health insurance industry. That was proposed by Nancy Pelosi and by Chuck Schumer. So nobody is blameless this entire thing.
Yeah, well, and we loved Steny Hoyer saying, absent an emergency, we won't come back till May 4th.
There are 22 million emergencies, and they're all unemployed. That's the emergency.
Unbelievable. So we will continue to keep up the pressure here. Love to see you keeping up the pressure in the ways that you can, and we'll see what transpires.
Certainly. All right, second question from Eric Wong. I was disheartened by the gulf between the economic populism left, performative ultra-wokeists for whom Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage are a lower priority because they aren't affected by them. Is there any way to overcome this gap moving forward? Oof. I guess that's a question for you, Krystal.
That is the question right there. One thing I covered this week, which I think is so emblematic of exactly the divide that you're talking about, is in Virginia, my home state where I was born and raised and where I live now. They now have Democratic governor, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. Democrats control everything, and yet they still are last in the nation, 51 out of 51 in terms of workers' issues. Activist union groups were able to pressure the administration to raise the minimum wage slowly, gradually over time, and were able to secure a few minor collective bargaining rights and things like that for workers. Okay, so that was a modest but significant win. Well, now, using the crisis as justification, Governor Ralph Northam, of blackface infamy, of course, has pushed off even those small incremental reforms, saying like, oh, now's not the time. We can't be messing with the economy. What are you talking about, now's not the time? Now's exactly the time. These are the people that are being hurt the most right now. But because the party in Virginia is a suburban party, which is very much what the Democratic Party has become. I shouldn't even say is becoming, has become nationwide in terms of the interests they cater to. Those issues that you're talking about, those economic populist issues, they're not relevant to them, they don't really care, or they're actively hostile to them. So instead, you get what we've gotten in Virginia. They passed the ERA, which literally does not do one single thing except for signal how great and progressive you are.
Wow, they're so progressive.
Yeah, exactly. New York Times writes them up, louds them for, and I'm not saying that nothing that they accomplished is worthwhile. They got through gun legislation, if that's important to you. They got through some pro-choice legislation. They got through removal of Confederate monuments. But they are still, like, I cannot call an administration progressive that is 51st in the nation in terms of worker rights. How do you bridge that divide? I don't know, Eric. Let me know if you have any ideas, because I think the Sanders campaign, part of why it was so important and so sort of existential within the Democratic primaries, because what it really was about was trying to change the trajectory of the Democratic Party to reorient it around that multiracial working class base. And so I think we have to see what happens in November, what opportunities there are in the future. But I think that's exactly what the left is trying to figure out right now.
It's an interesting question. All right, next question from Mustafa. A lot of college students feel left out with respect to the stimulus and relief efforts. What are your thoughts on this, and how can college students make their voices heard? Mustafa's actually right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
completely.
A lot of these college students are listed as dependents. They don't necessarily get the payments,
the $1,200 checks. Yeah.
Even though they're independent actors, often many of them are working. A lot of them are saddled with student debt. I mean, the Trump administration has frozen federal loan payments. I think that's great. They've stopped student debt interest, but that's not enough. And in terms of making our voices heard, it's always about this. Frankly, not many of you showed up to vote in the Democratic primary, and most of you didn't show up to vote in 2018 and in 2016, and that's the real, how do you make your voice heard? Vote. Become a reliable base, and also become engaged in the conversation and demand that something needs to be happening. I mean, right now, the fact that so many of you are racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt in an economy where, your future cannot be guaranteed by the government, which is the very basic role that they have, is unconscionable. And we should be making steps in order to make sure that colleges, who are some of the most predatory industries who are out there, are not charging you extra for online classes or not paying you back for your dorm fees, or, there's so many different things that need to be looked out for. It's a huge vulnerable group, and, we very much see you.
Yeah, I think actually the question is not just about college students. I think it's very hard during this time when you have to be quarantined, just like the ability to protest, since you can't have a mass gathering. You can't go out and protest. We talked to Glenn Greenwald on this show. In Brazil, there have been protests against Bolsonaro, where what they do is at a certain appointed time, they'll go to the window and bang like pots and pans, which is kind of cool, but it's so much less sort of ominous and threatening than an actual physical gathering of human beings, which sends a real message, like a visceral message of strength and power. So I think it's an important question, not just for college students, but there is so much injustice that is going down in this town right now, and we have so little ability to push back on it as a collective.
Certainly.
It's very concerning.
It's a hard dynamic.
That does it for us. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. We really appreciate you guys. Appreciate you watching.
That's right. We'll be back here later today for more Rising. Happy Sunday, everybody.